Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am Lisa Wright Eichelberger from Clayton State University, and I'm also the co-lead of the Georgia Nurses on Boards project, which I'll tell you a little bit about that in just a little while. But I'm delighted that you are here with me this afternoon to talk about becoming a voice for change, serving on a board. This morning I was watching the news and I heard the lack of indictments about Breonna Taylor and the rioting and the police shootings that occurred in Louisville. And there's so much going on in our world right now that needs our voices, needs the voices to speak to power and to gain power, where we can help to make a positive change. And serving on a policy board is one way that you can do that. And so whether your passion lies in COVID-19 or in curing polio, eradicating polio in the rest of the world, or fighting for social justice, it doesn't matter what your passion is that once you become a voice on a board that has policy-making implications, you are able to be at the table where those policies are being made and where you, as a health professional, be it doctor, nurse, whatever, have those values that you bring with you as a health professional to that community and to that issue. And in doing so, you have the opportunity to make powerful change. So, why be on a board? Well, I just told you one of the main reasons that I think it's important, but there are many reasons for why being on a board. It's not just about making social change or about making change. It's also extremely personally rewarding. You're probably thinking, good grief, I have enough to do without serving on a board. So why in the world would I do that? I'm busy every day taking care of patients, but it's very good for you professionally as well. When people see that you are on a board or serving on a board, that breeds confidence in them. It shows that you have evidence of thought leadership, that you have been designated as a thought leader in your industry, and you certainly have knowledge and leadership ability, and it does bring some desirability and credibility to you as a professional. It also, many times, depending on which board you choose, it exposes you to another type of industry. I've noticed through the pandemic and through the social unrest, the call for community review boards and the effect that policing or lack thereof or systemic racism in certain industries, that could really benefit from our health professionals' view of equity and justice and fairness. And so when I've seriously considered myself getting involved in a community review board in my own community, that exposes me or would expose me to a completely different type of industry. So if you do choose to serve on a board, it may not necessarily be within your wheelhouse or within your comfort zone. And you get to learn a lot more about another industry, perhaps. It also significantly, significantly strengthens your future job prospects. I mean, it's not all about altruism. I mean, it looks good on your resume, and you also get tremendous opportunities to network with other people. I've served on 2 hospital boards, and as a result of that, I got to attend the trustee meetings at the Georgia Hospital Association. And so that was a foray into getting to meet the leadership within the hospital association that I wouldn't have had had I not been a board of trustee for a hospital. So how do you start? Where do you start? I think probably the best way is to figure out what do you care about? What are you passionate about? Where do you want to make a difference? Because that's where that's where your heart lies. If that's what you're interested in, then that's what you're going to care about. And it's a lot of work being on a board. The board packets I get for the hospital that I sit on, they're quite extensive. And so my uncle served on the Federal Reserve Board, the National Federal Reserve Board, and then a nurse friend of mine served on it as well many years later. And the packet of information that they were given and required to read took hours and hours and hours. So it needs to be something that you care about, so that you're willing to put the time in. And whatever you're thinking about, whatever your interests are, like what are you here today at this great conference to learn about? Is it polio? Is it COVID? Is it equity and social justice? Whatever that is, those are your values. And that's probably the very, very best place to start. When I do board training, which we certainly don't have time to go into today, but I will help people. I'll let them take an inventory about, it's the VIA, Values and Action Inventory, and you can actually Google it and find it yourself online and take it. It's free, and it tells you what your values are. And my top one is justice. So and fairness. So that explains why I would gravitate toward the community review boards. So why be on a board? I think I've told you most of all. And if we were doing this in person, I would spend a little time letting you share why you're interested and why you're here. But unfortunately, we don't have time to do that. But find somebody that you respect, a mentor or a boss or a colleague, and talk it over and say, hey, I think I'm interested in maybe serving on a board, and tell them why it is. Now, for most health professionals, the reasons that they want to serve on a board or community board are in this word cloud. It's to make the community a better place. In Georgia, we are dead last, except for poor old Mississippi, in the number of children that are immunized in our state. That should bother all health professionals. Our maternal mortality rates 50th. Our health outcomes just dropped the report just came out from the Commonwealth that said we were 42 last year. Now we dropped to 46. So there's so many things for us to care about, as well as what's going on nationally with the social injustice and the systemic racism and things like that. So health professionals are by nature giving, and they want to make a difference for the better to improve their services. That's certainly why I've served on the hospital board, is because I want to make my community hospital a better place. And so that's why I am serving. You have to think about your time. When you consider serving on a board, you have to think, is this the right time? I'm really interested in something. I really value what they do. I know what my strengths are. They're looking for somebody with my type of expertise. But do you have the time to do it? You know, I'm older and I have 5 children. I don't know that I could have done this. I know I couldn't have done this if I still had my small children at home, especially in COVID that have to be homeschooled. So it's a commitment, and very often it's a multi-year commitment. Some boards are self-perpetuating, and once you get on the board, it's a 3-year term. And this current hospital board that I'm on, I was appointed for a 3-year term, and now I've been reappointed. So we're looking at a minimum of 6 years commitment to that particular institution. Now, not all are that long or that time consuming. Some are different, but some are more. And so you need to understand that, what the expectation. So how do you get on a board? Well, it's about who you know, or who gets to know you. The first major board outside of nursing organization, you know, you get elected as president or secretary or treasurer, then you get on the board of an organization through elections. But that's still about who knows you, because if people don't know you, they don't vote for you. But my first hospital board appointment came through a legislator, and through through my policy work down at the Capitol. And they wanted a nurse, and they'd never had a nurse before. And they thought a nurse would bring a dimension to their board they didn't have. And so he knew me because of my work down at the legislature. So sometimes it's who you go to Sunday school with, you know, who you go to church with, who you know at the. I have to tell you a story. When I was at a trustee meeting, and at the Georgia Hospital Association, they have an annual soiree. It's a really big, fancy schmancy deal, and for all the trustees. And I was sitting there, and first of all, they thought my husband was the one that was on the board, but the other 4 trustees that were there with their wives, you know, we were making small talk, and I said, you know, what do you do? And, you know, one was an insurance agent, one was a business, another local business owner, so forth. And they said, what do you do? After they asked my husband, and they found out I was the one on the board. I said, I'm a nurse. And they looked stunned. And I said, do you have a nurse on your board? And they said, no, we don't even know any nurses that don't work at the hospital. So the nurse or the healthcare worker needs to be in their sphere of acquaintances, because if you don't know anybody, if you don't know them, then how are they going to pick you? Now, sometimes we'll talk in a minute about using board recruiters, but most, unless you're at the corporate level, for paid board positions, on the national level, most don't use board recruiters. It's done by the individual board members themselves or the CEO of the organization. So you need to get to know them. Cover letters. Most of the time, I don't think much. I hire people all the time in my position. You probably do too. Most people don't think that much about cover letters. I just kind of toss them aside because they're usually just a pro forma kind of thing. But cover letters are very useful in board, particularly if you're trying to introduce yourself to a board that doesn't know you. And we'll talk a minute about what needs to go in there. But they should be written to the key people that you're trying to influence. Very short, to the point. Tell them, how you fit, your skills fit with their mission and their goals. Do your research. Know everybody that's on that board, what they do, what that organization does, and make sure that you personalize it. You answer the why questions, in that cover letter. Why would that organization be better off with you on the board? And then ask for yourself, why would you be better off if you served on that board? And if you got a good fit there, then maybe you've got a match. So you write a cover letter, or you get introduced, or somebody approaches you and says, hey, would you consider being on our board? Then you go for an interview, and you'll need to explain why you want to be on a board. It is a job interview because it is a job. And some of the positions are paid quite handsomely. I've had board appointments where I was paid. And then some where I was not. So, but nevertheless, it's still an interview process. And you also have to see if you're going to get along with the rest of the board members, but you're going to focus on what you bring to the board. And it's mainly the value of your professional knowledge. If you are a nurse, if you are a physician, and both of the hospital boards it's much more common to have a physician on a hospital board. Not all of them have physicians, but it's much more common to have a physician on a board than it is a nurse on the board. And they want that expertise, that understanding, that insight into your profession, whether you be the lawyer or the pharmacist or the insurance agent or whatever, or the accountant that's on the board. They're looking for what can you bring to that board. So you need to create a board resume. And I had never even heard of a board resume. I'd always heard of a CV or a regular resume. And most of us in academia, probably most of the people here at this conference, they have traditional curriculum vitae, which may be 20, 30 pages. I got one the other day, it was 35 pages long. So anyway, that's not a board resume. First of all, they don't want to read it. They don't have time to read it. And a lot of it is not applicable to the board service. So what you want to do is to make sure that it's short, not your CV. Most of them will not print it out. They're going to read it on the computer and use a targeted format. And I'm going to show you an example of that in a minute. But you are going to figure out what it is that board wants, and then what board relevant experiences you have that matches the mission and the goals and the objectives of that particular board slot that they're trying to fill, because they are trying to fill a slot that you're going to take over, and they have in mind what they need. So you need to do your homework to know what they're looking for, and then highlight those. You need to make sure you include your organizational experiences, your committee experiences, if they're relevant, not everything you've ever done. But then, and your master list of capabilities. You know, if you are an expert in patient satisfaction, you know, that's helpful if you're trying to serve on a hospital board, or what's transferable. If you are an expert in robotics, and this is a tech startup company that's looking for somebody that wants to understand robotics, then highlight that. So you develop a value proposition. This is an example of you know, board resume, like I said, needs to be very short. It's not comprehensive, with very selective things, and the accomplishments that are related to the mission of that board. So just 3 or 4 of your board specific capabilities, not everything you've ever done. And I've already said, know your audience, be very clear, and know what they're looking for. And sometimes you have to really dig. And if you can't find out, then ask the board chair, the board president, or the CEO of the organization. What are you looking for this particular opening that you have at the board? Now, this is an example of a targeted, this is a board resume. And this is a person that has been in healthcare, and you see how they box things and they highlight things, and they tell you, you know, what exactly they have done that would be of interest to a board, like strategic planning, change leadership, partnering, launching globally, crisis management, cost savings, efficiency. So list the things and then get very specific, like this one, delivered 20 to 30 million. Let me start. Cost savings, efficiency improvement. Most every agency is interested in that. And so this particular person gave an example of how they delivered a $20 to $30 million saving each year through Lean Six Sigma projects. That tells a lot in one, you know, in less than 10 words. And then the second page, this is no more than 2 pages, but it is jam-packed with ability. She also highlighted workforce diversity, corporate governance, culture building, and then just a brief little blip about her early career, any professional board. Always put your board experience on there. If you've had board experience, then put that on. Professional boards and community boards, and then, you know, an education, just 2 little blips down at the very bottom. Very different than a CV, very different. You have to know if you're ready to serve on a board, and you're going to start off small if you've never served on a board before. There are online assessments. The Oregon Readiness Assessment is a really good one. And it looks at your, you know, whether you're available, we've already talked about that, whether you have a strategic mindset, whether you have the leadership qualities. You know, some people are great followers, but they're not leaders. You need leaders on a board. You also need to be able to speak finance and understand HR and law and the special knowledge. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to be the expert in it, but you are going to have to understand EBITDA and learn what that means. If you don't know what that means, you know, you're going to have to learn as you go along what it means, because the finances are a huge part of any board that you would choose to serve on. These are the American Hospital Association Trustee Competencies. They have a book about board governance. And you can see here, it's very similar to the one that I just listed before. You know, it's about accountability, being achievement oriented. They want to know what your outcomes are, not process, but, you know, that I was the, you know, chief executive officer, or I was the medical officer, or I was an internist, you know, in practice for however many years. That's all well and good. But what did you do? What did you accomplish during that time? Make it achievement oriented, outcome oriented. You know, when I was, you know, an internist, I took my practice and we grew it from X number of patients with X revenue to X and X within 5 years, or implemented electronic medical records and those types of things. That's much more helpful to somebody looking to choose you for their board. It's all about your impact and your influence. And you can see that through awards. If you've been given awards for certain things, then, you know, list them, but don't list every award you've ever gotten if it's not directly relevant. How you've developed talent, and of course your leadership is completely appropriate. Now, this was adopted from the Nurse on Board CE module from the American Nurses Association. And this is what I alluded to earlier about knowing the people on the board and what they're looking for. And this is 3 board members, board member A, B, and C. And you graft your board member's ability and you say, board member A, what kind of competencies do they have, or what kind of skills? And so if you're a nurse and or a physician, then you would have an X here and an X here. Or if you have a background in public health or academia, you would check as much as you have. This board's, you know, they have a healthcare executive, they have business owners, and they have a CFO or a CPA and somebody with expertise in HR, but no attorney. And these are very typical things that you look for in a broad, well-developed board. Are they a community leader? Because that's who they know. You know, they'll help you with who they know. You know, I was recruited to the boards that I've been recruited to because I had an academic background. I understood that, and I was a nurse. I understood public health, and I also had political advocacy as a background. So nobody would have all of these, but you want to have a board where most all of them are checked. If it's a healthcare board, so that you would have a perspective. And it's a really beautiful thing when you do have, when the risk management person is helping, you know, the academician and the physician, you know, make some decisions about downsizing or whatever. Then you call on your business owners, your HR, and your attorneys to really be able to help you make those tough decisions. So then how do you get chosen? Well, after you're noticed, you want to network. You want to let them know that you're interested in it. And you want to highlight being recognized. Sometimes volunteers, I've gotten phone calls here at Clayton State University asking about people to serve on boards after our faculty was named the AJC Faculty of the Year. Because we were recognized and noticed, they thought, well, if they've got, you know, that kind of faculty there, then they must be, we want them on our board. And so, you know, I get a call that way. A lot of times you get picked because you're a volunteer. You've been volunteering at this organization for a long time, and they see how committed you are, and then they'll ask if you would like to become a member of the board. Search firms, there are board placement search firms. And as I said, most of the time those are for your larger corporate boards. But most of the time it's word of mouth, particularly in boards. It's who you know and who knows you. They'll say, you know, we've got to fill so-and-so slot. He's had two terms. Now it's time, and we're looking for these things. This time we want to do X with our board appointment. And so they will ask all of the board members, who do you know that you think would be good to fill in with that particular in that particular slot. The Nurse on Boards Coalition, I did want to mention that right now, as a result of the Institute of Medicine's Future of Nursing report, which came out originally in 2010, the Nurse on Boards Coalition was formed 5 years ago, with the goal of getting 10,000 nurses on health-related boards by 2020. And the reason that initiative was chosen as a strategy is because that is the way that changes are made within healthcare, is at the board level. If you're not at the table, if you don't have a seat at the table, then you're overlooked and then forgotten. And so the Nurse on Boards Coalition was founded 5 years ago, and the goal was to have 10,000 by 2020. 2020 is almost over with, and we're about at 8,000. So I'm not sure we're going to make our 10,000 by 2020, but we certainly have made strides. And so what can you do? Well, if you're a nurse watching this, you can certainly be counted or indicate your interest in the future of serving on a board. And you can do that at the website that's linked here. You can contact your local nonprofits and others and ask them to consider a nurse, a physician, or health professional for a board. The Board of Health. I've served on our county Board of Health, and in Georgia, they are mandated by law to have a nurse or a community advocate as a member of the Board of Health in all 159 counties. So, and it's appointed by the mayor of the largest city in the county. So make contact with that person. If you live in that community, the Board of Health is an excellent way to make a difference. And so contact that mayor and say, Mayor so-and-so, I know that a nurse should be on that board, or a community advocate. The health officer is a physician, is always on it. But the nurse is one that may or may not be. So that's one way. And then explore this idea of community review boards, or whatever your area of interest in. If you're here and you're really interested in infectious diseases, or if you're here today because of polio, then find out what are the agencies, what works to eradicate polio? And then what about, you know, March of Dimes? And if you're interested in immunizations, find out who's championing that. And then volunteer with them, ask about a board appointment. Consider nominating a candidate for your board preparation training. Learn how. The Atlanta Women's Foundation, they do board training. They do beginning board training, and they do advanced board training. The Georgia Nursing Leadership Coalition does board training, and there's online board training available as well. So decide to become an impact leader in your community and encourage others, because we have a responsibility not only at the bedside, but also to advocate in the community as well. I thank you so much for your time this afternoon, and I wish you all the very best. Bye-bye.